All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ECE Webinar 5. This is the fifth in our series of 6 ECE webinars, and this webinar was designed largely in response to requests and questions from the field about how to apply for the Tpe pilot, which is Pilot 1, and about the status of Tpe aligned curriculum. We have a special presenter today, who is June Milovich, a faculty member at Saddleback Community College and co-director of the CAP project. If you have questions during the web presentation today, we will be offering you several opportunities to have those questions answered, and we're also trying to work as fast as we can to respond to the questions in the chat feature. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm sorry. So can back up one, I'm sorry. I was ahead of myself. So this webinar will present a step-by-step tutorial of the application process, the expectations for and completion of Appendices A, B, and C for Pilot 1. And I've already introduced June as our presenter. Most of you know me by now. I'm Phyllis Jacobson, Administrator in the Professional Services Division of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and my work is largely focused now in early childhood education. Okay, next. So this slide shows us how far we've come. We've had 4 previous webinars, and we have one final one today, after today. Today's being the Pilot 1 walkthrough. The next webinar that is remaining for December 11th is going to be on the program quality peer review process. And you won't want to miss that one because we're going to talk about the development and piloting of a brand new process for early childhood preparation programs. Next slide. So under the preschool development grant renewal, there are 4 ECE pilots. We've separated them out so that people can easily see what we're piloting and what the different requirements are for those pilots. The first one is on the teaching performance expectations, and that's going to be our primary focus today. Pilot 2 focuses on the ECE program guidelines and implementing those guidelines, and we will be talking a little bit about that in our next webinar in December. Pilot 3 was associated with webinar 3, which is the ECE Teaching Performance Assessment, and we are soon going to be issuing a call for those of you who are interested in applying to serve on the design team for the ECE Teaching Performance Assessment work. And then Pilot 4, which will be the topic for our next webinar on December 11, will be on the ECE program quality peer review process and development, and that one will also feature the application process for those of you interested in serving potentially on the design team for that process. We have provided a link on the ECE webpage to the pilot guidance document and the application. Within the pilot guidance document, there are paper copy, or there is a printed copy, I should say, of both the guidance itself and what the application form looks like. It is an online application form, but we've printed out what the form asks you to provide within that guidance document so that you can have that for reference, and June will be walking you through that today as well. And so now, without further ado, I will turn this over to June.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you today. I see some familiar names in the chat box. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a full-time faculty member at Saddleback College. My program is NAEYC accredited, and I am the co-director of the Curriculum Alignment Project, which many of you have heard about in some of the previous webinars. And so when I very first heard about the pilots, I knew already that they were going to be something important to be involved in as a faculty member preparing students in the state of California. But I also felt a little bit hesitant, like, if I commit to this, what am I getting my department into? And so I volunteered to do this webinar because I was wondering and thinking that many of you might feel that same way. And I know that sometimes it helps just to kind of walk through and see what each step was. So essentially that's what we're going to do today. And I prepared a few examples, and you can certainly put questions in the text in the chat box. And it can potentially be that some of your questions might be individual to your institution, community colleges might have a different answer than a CSU, might have a different answer than a private college. So certainly we can work to answer everyone's individual questions. So if you were to take the deep breath and click the button to start your application for Pilot 1, you start out here, as you see on the screen, with some very basic contact information, your institution, the name of your particular department, who will be your main contact, and this can be the same person, the name of authorized submitter for candidate applications. Some colleges already have someone in this role who submit their students' applications, either routed through CDTC to CTC or straight to CDTC itself. And that's page 1, very basic information. Then page 2 asks a little bit of clarifying information. So there's 2 choices here. One is that you have already aligned your own curriculum to the teacher TPEs. So this would have been something you would have had to have done fairly recently, as the TPEs weren't released or approved until April of 2019. So this is some work that you might have done in the past year. So potentially, if so, you would click the first option here. Our program has aligned our own curriculum. And we'll be using this curriculum with, and give us an idea of your 2020-21 candidates, 21-22, or 22-23. I know sometimes the curriculum alignment, the curriculum approval process at individual campuses isn't immediate, and so you might have an idea of when your curriculum might be approved and actually implemented at your school. Your other option, the second choice here, is that you're in the process of aligning your curriculum to the teacher TPEs, and then when you might be able to implement that. So this might be perhaps you're CAP aligned, and now you're going to take a look at the revised outlines, and in your next curriculum review cycle, update them to include any of the expanded language. So this, again, have you already gotten a head start on this? I think this is going to be very few campuses, if any, 2021, but potentially for 21-22 or for 22-23. So where are you in that particular process? And then question 2, or question 1B, is about the program guidelines. So I just put as a quick reminder here the 6 program guidelines. And so you'll give us an indication of what year are you going to begin to implement and work on demonstrating how you align with the program guidelines. So in this current year, the year that starts fall 21, the year that starts fall 22, and then just a reminder here of what they are. You know, 1 being how, what selection of courses did you make in your program, and 2, what are you going to be doing in those courses. 3, the practicum and fieldwork experiences. How are you supporting students for number 4, your faculty and supervisor qualifications for number 5, and then how are you finding out how your students got to where you wanted them to be. So those are that was my little brief summary of those. But, and so if you, and it could be that you intend to start right away, but you don't really work on, you aren't able to dig into some of the pieces until the following year. So just when you plan to start would be the best selection here. And then also, instead of, you can select either you are working to update your curriculum, but also you have an option if your college is already NAEYC accredited, not your college, excuse me, but your early childhood education program is NAEYC accredited. That also can be a method of eligibility. And so either you're currently accredited or you're not accredited and not interested, not even seeking this, or you might be somewhere in that process. And so if you are, so for example, if you checked the third option, you would say perhaps you're in self-study, or perhaps you've submitted your self-study and you're waiting for your site visit. So just some little detail here to let us know where you are in that process. So that's funny, I almost clicked the next button instead of the go further slide button. And then you'll come to the section which is the assurances. And the assurances essentially, they're kind of like the handshake. It's like, okay, if I'm going to join this pilot, here's what I'm agreeing to do. And so there's two types of assurances. One is about the Tpes, and there's another set that are about the guidelines. So assurance one about the Tpes is that you're going to submit, sorry, I went ahead of myself. You're going to submit a list of the courses. So this is kind of your program design. The courses that will enable, through those courses, will enable your students to meet the Tpe competencies. And so it's a very simple matrix. For Appendix A, I made you a sample of what it might look like. And here's from Saddleback College. Here's what that matrix looks like. Just a very simple chart. Nothing more than this is required. So I thought that was a fairly easy, fairly easy ask from CTC. And then in Appendix B, so Appendix B asks kind of where do the Tpes live within your courses. And so if your college is already CAP aligned, even CAP aligned but haven't yet updated, haven't yet revised your courses to the outline recommendations that just came out, even if you're already CAP aligned, you don't have to submit this matrix. You would check back in question 1A that you're in process of making those revisions, but you wouldn't have to submit the matrix for Appendix B. But if your college isn't CAP aligned, then here's a sample of what that matrix might look like. And I think this is going to go to the right place. Phyllis, did my screen share transfer to the Google Doc?
I'm sorry, June, what are you asking?
No, it did not.
It did not. Okay, I'm going to quick switch over to show this for a second. I will reshare. And then I will go back to the slideshow. So are you able to see a Google Doc now?
Yes, we can see this.
All right, so here is, if your college is not CAP aligned, here's a sample of what this matrix might look like. So you'll see on the left are the Tpes, the main categories, not all the details of them. And then there's 3 columns. And so in the first column would be the course where the most of this particular Tpe comes from. So you'll see that there's a variety of courses down the second column. And then in the column to the right are other courses where pieces of the Tpe1, the elements of Tpe1 might be met. And so that could be a number of courses, or for example, if we get down to more of the field work examples, there might be one main course, but a few less here that are the sort of the supplementary courses, and maybe even just one in each column, or maybe everything gets covered in the middle. So you can see that there are, and this will require you to just kind of take a look at your content in relation to the Tpes, and kind of determine where that happens in your particular program. So I'm going to switch sharing again back to the PowerPoint presentation. All right, and so then we will go to the next slide. So now we get to the assurances, the handshake, so to speak, about the program guidelines. And so there is a checklist in Appendix C, and that once you submit your application, you'll submit this checklist within 120 days. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide, which actually has the language from the survey. And so here's where you'll take a look in relation to the program guidelines and see how is your institution, where are you currently, and what things might need a little bit of revision, what things need no revision, and what things actually maybe need a little bit more work. And so again, I'm going to have to switch my sharing. I made a sample of what that might look like. So I will switch and share that. All right, so here's a sample of Appendix C. These questions are right out of, you'll find them in the pilot guidance document. So at the top, you would list who's the team at your college. So that would be faculty, department chairs at your particular institution. And then you'll see the guidelines. There are the 6 guidelines. And then you just make a simple X where you think you are at this moment. No changes, you might need minor revisions, you might need major revisions. So I filled this out for our Saddleback College, and we are a CAP-aligned college, and we are NAEYC accredited, but there are in some of the extra details of the Tpes, some things that when next time we update our curriculum, our course content, that we will do some minor revisions. The foundation is there, but a little bit more detail for us is necessary. And so that guideline 1 was about the program design, what's happening in the courses, field work. Being NAEYC accredited, our program does have a fairly significant, a solid base in field work. So I think that we are okay here. Of course, I'm sure that we will take a look again. So you have to decide where your college is there. And so far down the list. So really there, you don't need anything other than check marks in this particular matrix. I'm going to stop reshare again. Here we go, back to the slideshow. So that's Appendix C. And assurance, here's another assurance about data. And so assurance 1 for enrollment data says that when you commit to the pilots, you're going to commit to submitting data for your candidates. And so this would be simply the number of students enrolled in your ECE program who are working towards a teacher level permit. And so I know at my college, at some points, you know, especially early on, this actually could be everybody enrolled in the program because they're all taking, for example, child growth and development, or they're taking child family community. And so at a local level, you'll decide to what extent you can divide that out, or if it simply is at that point in your data reporting, that might be all of the students in your program, or it might be a portion. And then there are assurances that you'll provide some various types of feedback. So I put them all on one page because they're fairly straightforward. You will provide some feedback from faculty. You'll provide some feedback from the candidates, and the CTC will provide actually the survey for you, so it's not something that you have to develop. You'll provide some feedback regarding the implementation of the program guidelines, and some feedback to commission about the overall experience. And Phyllis has assured me that the surveys would be very simple, not terribly complicated, with just really the information they needed to inform their progress on the particular project, on this project. And assurance 2 is, so this is an agreement that your college can participate. And so the name of the responsible institutional administrator, I know I personally had a question about this. It's like, who is that? And so this is definitely a local decision. You know, it might be that as a faculty member, you can check with your department, and this is something that you have within your power to say, yes, I'm going to take charge of this, or this might be your dean, or it might be your VP. That will certainly be a local decision process. So whatever your college decides, simple information, contact information. And there you go, your Pilot 1 application is complete. So then the remaining things to do at that point, here's a little bit of a summary. The remaining things to do at that point. So the application is actually, you'll see a copy of it in Appendix D of the guidance document, so you can kind of go over these questions that I just showed you in the PowerPoint. So that's there so you can see the questions. But once you start the electronic survey, you'll complete those screens that we just went over. And then you will submit your course list. That's simple. Just chart with the course name, the course number, the units, and whether or not it's required. And if you are not CAP aligned, you would submit the TPE matrix, and then everybody would submit the program guidelines alignment checklist. That's the one where you make a determination. Do you think you need a lot of work, a little work, or no extra work? That would always be the best place to be. But change is good. And then once we have everybody collected and on a list, you'll provide the candidate enrollment data annually and the types of feedback that were on that list annually. That's your agreement. And all towards moving ECE towards the learning to teach model that other teachers in the state are using. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and I think that I see that there have been some questions.
So let me help out a little bit here. June, if you could just go back one slide.
Absolutely.
So we always put up this graphic because we're always grounded in the focus on trying to implement the learning to teach system with appropriate modifications for the early childhood preparation process. And so today we're focusing primarily on the system that will allow you to implement TPE-focused curriculum, or TPE aligned curriculum, I should say, as part of the pilots. Also, as part of these pilots, we're focusing on the supports for that process, which include the program standards or the program guidelines that help provide you with the elements of high quality programs to support your coursework and your candidates' preparation and their ability to demonstrate the competencies that they are now able to do. And then we've worked our way around this graphic.
Sorry, Phyllis, it keeps popping back and forth.
I know, the graphic is having fun today.
It is, yes, it is.
And so we've also talked about Pilot 3, which as we work our way around the graphic shows us that we're talking about performance assessments. And then as we continue around our graphic, the program quality is going to be, and the data-informed decision-making is going to be part of the pilot number 4, which we'll be talking about on December 11th. So we're coming full circle in our system of learning to teach here. And then if you go on to the next slide, June. So we've tried to answer quite a lot of questions in the chat already. We've given you another link here to the ECE News mailing list. And we've given you a link to the ECE webpage. And we are going to try to answer now any more questions that we may have. We can enable questions through the chat, and we can also enable questions for people to present verbally. So I'm looking across the questions that have come into the chat, and I know that there were a couple of questions, June, having to do with the CAP alignment matrices between the CAP coursework and the TPEs and where people might find this information. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
So our scope of work didn't include creating a crosswalk or a map, so to speak, because colleges can really include the course elements, kind of, that's an individual institutional decision. And so we didn't want to be too prescriptive in that sense and preserve institutions' ability to meet their students' needs, you know, depending on their own population and kind of the way that their particular program worked. So we don't have that crosswalk. We are, as we are working in this year's scope of work, we're working on developing sample methods of evaluation that might align with particular courses, particular course student learning outcomes. And through that, those methods of evaluation, we will create more of a crosswalk, and those methods of evaluation also will be aligned to TPEs. So to be continued for that particular question.
Thank you. And then I see there's a question here about a curriculum cutoff and having perhaps only one official year before the project ends. The ECE pilots are funded by the preschool development grant, and that's giving us the support for getting this process off the ground. Just because we might have the ending period of the grant itself doesn't mean that our learning and our collaborative work together would necessarily end. We're at the beginning, not the ending, of our process. And we are all waiting for the recommendations of the master plan committee. Once those come out and we see how that work relates to the work that we've been trying to do with you here now at the beginning of our process, we don't know what the future holds. We're expecting that the work of the master plan and the direction of the master plan committee will be consistent with the direction that we've already begun. So we're all on a journey together, and we've got enough support to keep us going these first 2 years, and we're going to see what happens once the master plan committee has released its report, and we see what the state response to that is.
And I think, would it be true also that not all of the program guidelines are focused on just the curriculum? There's definitely elements across the program guidelines that colleges can work on even in the meantime of curriculum receiving formal approval and implementation.
And then I saw a question also here about Tpe alignment and whether it has to be in one course, it can be spread across multiple courses. And the answer is the commission sets an expectation for programs. And for example, the TPEs are expectations for candidate competencies that they will learn, practice, and be assessed on within the preparation program. But the commission refrains from telling you exactly how you have to do that. It is up to each program to determine where those fit in the coursework and how they fit in the coursework. We only say that they must be covered within the coursework. So it's okay if you have a given TPE that is covered in part in one class or course, in part in another, if several are in one course and several are in another. How you organize your program is all acceptable as long as you're giving candidates an opportunity throughout the program to make sure that they have been able to learn, practice, and be assessed on the TPEs.
Phyllis?
Yes.
Let me turn on my, so people don't just hear my. So I've been trying to capture a few of these questions and grabbing them over into a Word doc and then getting rid of them as I think they've been answered. But there seems to be a couple of questions about individuals talking about having NAAYC accreditation and how that's tied to their degree programs, and asking about how they respond to the pilots. That there seems to be some concern, confusion about answering the pilots based on each of the degree programs they have, as opposed to responding to the pilot based on the permit preparation programs they have. Can you clarify that?
I'm trying to figure out the best way to address that.
Right, so the question is basically, if we're NAEYC accredited and we have several degrees accredited by NAEYC, do we respond to the pilot for each of those degree programs?
No, the pilot is focused on where your candidates learn practice and are assessed on the TPEs. And that may be across several different of these programs, or I'm trying to think the best way to phrase it. The Commission doesn't require NAEYC accreditation in order to participate in the pilots or in order to offer ECE preparation. So we're focused on what coursework candidates get, whether or not that coursework is accredited by NAEYC, and how the coursework addresses the TPEs and how your program meets the expectations for high quality preparation programs in general. I think that's the best answer I can give without some assistance.
Well, and NAEYC is particular about separating out the data between students completing one program or another, and that's a little bit sticky sometimes, I know from our own college's experience. And so CTC's data that they're looking to gather or alignment to the program guidelines, I think you could almost think of it more as, is your department meeting all of the program level guidelines through maybe one or more of their programs, or in one or more of their programs. In my understanding, my reading over and having conversations with Phyllis, it's you have a little bit bigger scope to work in, not just limited to, I mean, you don't have to complete the pilot program guidelines for each particular program because there's so much overlap between, you know, your faculty teach both programs, right? Your students likely take the same, maybe the same class in both programs, that's their practicum or fieldwork class. And so that all of those crossovers don't have to be kept track of separately to meet the program guidelines for CTC.
I think it's also potentially a vocabulary issue here, because at CTC, when we talk about programs, we're talking about preparation programs, and that preparation is tied to a permit or a credential, not a degree. So when we talk about programs and program guidelines, they're preparation program guidelines, not degree program guidelines.
It's more like your department guidelines.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a question that's come up a couple of times also. Do we need to flesh out the Tpe alignment within our course syllabi as well? Because we're being asked to include the syllabi in the courses with the documentation.
I was just typing a response to that question as you raised it. So June and I spent quite a bit of time yesterday reviewing the application forms and going through each of the requirements and trying to figure out what was absolutely necessary and what we could do without at this point in order to help streamline the process and get people going on the pilots. And so one of the things that we decided we really don't need at this point is for everybody to send us a huge amount of documentation for every course syllabus that you have. We know that if you're using the CAP coursework or the CAP aligned coursework, or you are in process of transitioning from the CAP coursework you've been using to the just newly updated coursework, that we have that documentation. It's available on the CAP website. I myself have spent about 2 years living with that coursework, trying to understand it. I'm familiar with it. And so we know already what that consists of, and we're trying to reduce the paperwork, so to speak, or electronic paperwork burden on everyone. So we have gone ahead and removed that specific requirement from Appendix B. So I think if you go back and look at the revised guidance document, and I'm glad that that gives me a segue into this topic, because we did just revise and repost yesterday the guidance document and the directions for how to apply. If you have already submitted an application, don't worry, it's good, you're fine. But from now forward, the new application form looks very much like the old, but we've eliminated this particular requirement. And we've also clarified the dates by which your program is expecting to use Tpe aligned curriculum and to be in alignment with the program guidelines over time. We realize that for the 2021 year, that's a little bit too late. And so we've gone ahead and extended that to 21-22 and 22-23. to give you more space to get your programs moving towards this. If you are not currently fully TPE aligned, that's fine. We still want you to participate in the project. This will give you that opportunity to move towards that and to try that out. So we are not trying to eliminate anyone from the pilots. We're trying to be as inclusive as we possibly can to help you start on this process and work collaboratively with us and with the whole community on these processes.
We had a couple of questions about providing candidate enrollment data. There's a little confusion about identifying the number of candidates in the program. So how should candidates be identified in terms of their enrollment?
You know, that's an excellent question, and June and I spent some time yesterday discussing that very question. I'm honestly, at this point, I am not certain how you identify what somebody's career goal is. We know that if they're enrolled in the child development coursework, they're intending to apply for a permit. And this is also a question that we're talking with our certification unit about, because as you know, participating in the ECE pilots allows you to recommend candidates for the permit. And so the question that we're talking about with the certification division is, does that give you the authorization to submit for all levels of the permit or only for the teacher level of the permit? And our thinking at the moment on that is that, well, if you're offering coursework for the teacher level permit, that same coursework is being taken by persons who are interested in starting on the matrix and moving their way up. It's the same coursework that everybody starts with. So it is a little bit difficult to distinguish whose career goal is for the teacher level and whose career goal is to stop at a lower level of the permit. This is a very interesting issue that I don't necessarily have a concrete answer for you. I'm meeting with our certification division next week to talk about this question, and then we will make that more clear to the field. It may be clearer for a four-year institution than for a community college. I think we need to have a little bit more discussion to clarify this. For the time being, I think that if you're offering coursework that will allow somebody to get the child development teacher level permit, then I think that those people would be included in this pilot. When we get a more definitive answer, I will be sure to post that in one of our ECE News Updates that we send you. We are actively working on that question. We had thought initially it would be a little bit more clear, but we are coming to realize that it is not as clear as we had thought at one point.
It will be simpler than the way that NAEYC expects their candidate data to be separated. I think, having had enough conversations with you, Phyllis, I feel very sure about that. It will be simpler than that process.
And we have a question here about how we're reaching out to community colleges. I can tell you that as part of our communication efforts, when we first started this process, we sent out a mailing to all of the community college groups, the communities of practice, of which there are 2 of them. We sent that mailing out. We sent it out to the CAP organization. We sent it out through West Ed. We sent it out through any organization that we could think of. We asked Peach. We asked everybody that we knew of to please get the word out that we were starting this process. We have a new ECE webpage and we have a new mailing list. So we hope that everybody who's listening to this, if you know anybody who hasn't been connected, who should be or who wants to be, please help connect them with us and with the webpage and with our news mailing list. We don't have a conduit more directly than you who are working in the field and know your colleagues and can help us connect with them. We are also reaching out to the Community College Chancellor's Office and the Academic Senate and trying to establish a relationship there as well. This is all work that is ongoing as we speak.
So there are several individuals with us today representing four-year colleges, and they have some questions and concerns about their degree programs, about the transferability from community colleges to their four-year programs, how do they know, how is it going to be communicated to them that these individuals are coming out of Tpe aligned CAP courses? And I don't know, some of these are kind of nuanced questions, so I don't know if we want to unmute one of these representatives and let them ask this question. I'm not sure I'm going to, pardon me.
I could add one element to that. So because the revisions, the Tpe aligned CAP revisions just came out, there currently isn't a college yet who has completed that process.
Okay.
But if you visit the CAP webpage, you'll see we've added straight on the front page for institutions who haven't yet become CAP aligned, and this is mostly four-year institutions because nearly all of the community colleges are aligned, a link to get on a listserv to be contacted with help. And for colleges who are already CAP aligned, there's a new form to say, I'm intending to update and revise my curriculum. That way CAP can reach out to you. And we created, or it's in the process, we have, you know how web pages are, you make the request and then it changes. But there will be a column added to the CAP aligned college page that will indicate whether or not they have updated to the Tpe revised curriculum. So it will be very simple check on one page.
We will also be providing an update agenda item to the commission at its regularly scheduled meeting in February of 21. And in that, we will be providing a list of all of the participants in the pilots as an update to the commission. So you will also be able to see which institutions are participating in the pilots. And I am seeing something in the chat about a question from Anthony Ayala, but I cannot see the question.
I have it. So the question was this. I believe for many of our programs, a concern is that there are actually many pathways to the teacher permit. If we're talking about that as a program and not our degrees. So if we're talking about the permit, basically the preparation for the permit as a program and not the degrees. Students need 24 units, so they may take many different combination of classes. That may or may not include practicum, for instance. And documenting where we meet the Tpes may not align with what students are actually taking to achieve a teacher permit. So are we looking at our degree as the program, or how our ECE departments permit people? Because that will have very different data.
I think I'm a little bit confused by that. Are you saying that candidates are not required to have practicum if they are going to get the child development permit? The practicum is the course where candidates would most likely be demonstrating and practicing with the competencies that will be assessed eventually on the performance assessment when it's developed.
So Anthony's response is that yes, it's most important, but it's not required for the current permit. So they may not be set up in that way.
I have honestly not heard of a program that doesn't have the practicum as part of the requirements. I would have to do a little bit more research on that. Okay, let's see.
So here's a question about basically the format of the Tpes document. In the Tpe document, there's a narrative, and then there's a list of elements. Mm-hmm. So when they are completing the Appendix C, are they indicating that they meet all of the elements under the specific Tpe? And what if you only partially meet those elements?
So yes, we are looking primarily at the elements. And if your program is not CAP aligned, but you are using your own curriculum, then you would need to address the elements that are not already in your program if you're going to be Tpe aligned.
All right. There's a lot of reiteration here that the
Is it about the practicum? Yes.
Yeah, that the permit doesn't require a practicum, which
Mm-hmm.
our requirements are course-based at the moment.
Well, all of this is food for some thought. I think we would be better to review this more carefully than just to answer this off the cuff.
Mm-hmm.
We will also say that depending on the recommendations of the master plan committee, the child development permit matrix may in the future be revised. We're working off the permit matrix that has essentially been unchanged since the 90s. And so we have waited to do this work until the master plan committee recommendations come out. So just because the matrix looks one way today, in the future, it may also change depending on where the master plan committee heads.
There's another question in here about how we would like these individuals to show, verify their alignment with the elements. And I know that I think June talked about that a little bit in her presentation, so perhaps this person wasn't able to be with us from the beginning.
Yes, June, did you want to go over again where they show that alignment?
In the slideshow?
Yes,
In Appendix C?
in Appendix B.
Oh, B, yes. Let me pull that back up.
And while June's doing that, I'll just say, and I included the link in the chat a couple of times. You may have to go back, and I will definitely include it again. On the Commission's ECE webpage, there is a link to these PowerPoint slides. And within the slides, it includes the links to some of the Google Docs that June also went over. So you do have access to those resources.
That was Appendix B.
Mm-hmm.
Reshare. So here you should see what was the question related? Sorry.
Yes, the question had to do with where do you show that they're aligned with the TPEs and if they're not aligned with the TPEs.
So here's the TPE on the left, and then you show which course contains the content that aligns with the most elements in that TPE. But it might not all come from one course, so there's a column for the other courses where pieces of that might be addressed.
And you can also use that column to indicate that some of the TPEs are not currently addressed in the program.
And so
you can
in
also,
this,
I'm sorry?
I was just saying it looks like within this matrix, we're looking at, it's just the title of the TPE that's included here. But the courses that are listed are sort of expected to respond to each of the elements within that larger TPE.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you.
We haven't broken this matrix out in that way. They're still.
I also call your attention to the program guidelines, because in the program guidelines, guideline number 2 talks about preparing candidates to master the early childhood education teaching performance expectations. And that means all of them, not just parts of them. You may only now have parts of them being addressed. That's okay. That's what this pilot is for, to help you move towards addressing all of them. And then you also have a guideline 3, which talks about opportunities to learn and practice. They have to have, or candidates have to have, field work or practicum or clinical practice experiences to provide candidates with these activities integrated with coursework that extend their learning through the application of theories. Through the application of theory to practice with young children in ECE settings. So as moving towards the program guidelines as part of this pilot, if you're not there at this point, then you would need to be moving towards that.
And this
recognize
matrix
that this is a major kind of change for the field. We recognize that it's been a fairly loosely organized system of coursework primarily that happens for these candidates. This is a major shift, and we don't mean to make light of that. And we know that along the way, some of you will have more work to do, some of you would have less work to do to align with the new expectations that we have. And that's why we're offering you this pilot opportunity.
This matrix will be used by individuals. So this pilot program is available for institutions who are CAP aligned and those who are not CAP aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And the matrix is completed regardless of CAP alignment. It's completed. And how about a reminder about when applications to participate in the pilot are due?
Certainly. For those of you who want to participate in the pilots, we are asking you to submit your applications by the end of January of 21. If you're going to be participating at all in this pilot during this coming year. If you are participating starting in the fall of 21, then we'd like your applications by September 1st of 21. Okay, some of these questions in the chat are getting fairly long. I think that, that at this point, perhaps we could take some of these under advisement and then do a Q&A document for this webinar, as we've done for some of the other ones. We do understand that this is a very, very complex issue. I mean, for a long time, this field has not been organized in the same way that we have been working with the credential or teaching and administrative credential programs, and we recognize that adjustments and so on will need to be made. And we thank you for pointing out some of these areas where we need to spend some more time and energy and effort figuring out what works for this field. You know, you never know these things until you start, and we are very flexible in trying to work with you and trying to make this work for you. But we think that there is, as Mary Sandy said so eloquently in our previous webinar, number 4, there is change coming. There's change in the wind, and there's change coming along. And it's easier, I think, if programs can work collaboratively together, or institutions can work collaboratively together and try to help the field move forward as best we can. Yes, there are moving pieces and parts right now. We don't know what might happen with the master plan. We don't know what might happen with the permit matrix in the future. But, you know, we have to start somewhere, and we have a solid foundation. We have competencies that have been agreed upon and have been adopted by the commission. We have a set of program guidelines that have served us very well in other areas of preparation, and we're trying to modify these as we need to and make them workable for the early childhood world. We've got a performance assessment that's going to be under development that will be formative in nature and that will help you to understand what your candidates have learned and mastered and can apply effectively in the field, and what areas of program improvement there might be. We've got a lot of these elements that are already built and are being built through the pilots, and we really appreciate your taking this journey with us.
I noticed one question about how colleges who currently aren't CAP aligned might get information or be added to the listserv. At the very first chat, I put the link to the Curriculum Alignment Project homepage, and there are right at the front, you don't have to go searching around for them, 2 places where if you are not CAP aligned, you can add yourself to the list to start receiving contact and support, or if you already are aligned and are intending to, that doesn't mean intending to like tomorrow or this week, but you have the intent to work on revising your curriculum, letting us know so we can reach out to help you. That website link is also on the ECE page that Phyllis has created on the CTC website.
I'm putting in the chat the due dates again. I saw that question.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we will take all of these questions and go back through them. And as I say, we're having conversations with our certification division, and we will come out with some responses and clarifications for you as soon as we can. Keep watching on the ECE News webpage, ECE webpage, and keep watching your mailbox for ECE News Updates. Please take a look at the revised, I won't say revised so much as updated guidelines document. We have made only a few changes, and one of those was to remove the requirements for the course syllabi and mass. And we've also made the dates more clear for when you're participating in TPE Pilot 1 and 2. So with that, I think I will thank everyone for their participation and their time today. I know we're ending a little bit early, but we just had one focus topic for today. Please join us on December 11th for the next webinar. We have a lot of information for you about the peer quality program review process that we're going to be developing with your assistance and input and advice. And we hope that you will all be able to join us for that. You can register now through the ECE webpage. Thank you very much, everyone.